Some shows end and let you sleep. Gravity Falls is not one of those shows. It ended in 2016, and the loose threads it left behind have only grown stranger with time. There is a triangle who burned his own home dimension to ash before the universe was 1 billion years old, and his final word was the name of a salamander god. There is a forgotten president pickled inside a slab of peanut brittle for 1.5 centuries. There is a goat with rectangular pupils who shows up at every important moment in the show, and who, according to the man who wrote the show himself, is the one creature Bill Cipher can possess without changing the shape of its eyes. There is a town built inside the crater of a starship that fell from the sky 30 million years ago. There is a journal with a monocle stitched into its spine for reasons no one has ever explained. There is a child named after a constellation he was born with on his forehead, and the name he was given at birth is the kind of name people argue about on message boards at 3 in the morning. There is a backwards prayer screamed into the void by a dying demon, and the prayer worked. The show solved many of its mysteries. The show left even more of them open. And somewhere underneath the floating cliffs of that little Oregon town, the answers are still buried. Tonight, we sink slowly into the unsolved mysteries of Gravity Falls. The monocle in the spine. The first mystery is the smallest one. The first mystery is also the one that has the most theories attached to it, considering how little it actually contains. It is a piece of glass. If you have ever held a copy of Journal 3, or even just paused the show on a frame of Dipper reading from it, you have seen a small monocle attached to the spine by a thin chain. It dangles. It is always there. It appears the very first time the journal does in Tourist Trapped, when Dipper finds the book buried inside a hollowed-out tree with a hidden compartment in the woods behind the mystery shack. The monocle is on the journal then. The monocle is on the journal in every subsequent episode. And the monocle, as far as the show ever bothers to mention, does nothing. It is never used. It is never lifted to anyone's eye. It is never even pointed at by a character. It just hangs there, swaying gently against the leather cover whenever Dipper turns a page. This is the part that does not make sense to anyone who has watched the show carefully. The author of the journals, Ford Pines, wears full-rim glasses. He always has. His glasses appear in every flashback, every present-day scene, every photograph. He has no reason to carry around a monocle. A monocle is for someone with one eye that needs help. Ford has 2 functioning eyes, and they both need help equally. The math does not work. So the fandom did what the fandom always does. The fandom built 1,000 theories, the most common one, which gained real traction around the time of Society of the Blind Eye, was that the monocle belonged to somebody else. Somebody who had owned the journal before Ford did, somebody who had passed it down, some old prospector or scholar in the Gravity Falls forest, who had begun documenting the weirdness long before Ford ever arrived, and who had simply lost the monocle inside the book when he passed it on. Other fans pushed in the opposite direction. They argued the monocle was not a tool for reading at all. They argued it was a key. They pointed to the way Journal 3 is built. The book has invisible ink that only shows up under blacklight, like in Into the Bunker, where Dipper discovers an entire bunker map written in ghost ink under a UV flashlight. If invisible ink is in the journal, what if the monocle is the lens that reveals a different kind of ink? What if there is a layer of writing only visible when you look through that little glass disc? The show never confirms this. The show never denies it. The monocle just hangs. A third theory is the spookiest one, and it ties back to something we will keep coming back to all night. The third theory is that the monocle belongs to a character we have not yet identified. A figure on the cipher wheel, maybe. A piece of the puzzle that Alex Hirsch dropped into the show and then walked away from before anyone could ask him about it. The wheel has 10 symbols: the pine tree, the shooting star, the question mark, the ice bag, the fez, the 6-fingered hand, the llama, the stitched heart, the glasses, and the crescent moon. The monocle is not on the wheel. The monocle is on the journal. The monocle is its own thing. And the question of whose face it once sat against, whose eye once peered through it, whose pocket it once lived inside before the journal swallowed it whole, remains open. The Book of Bill, released by Hirsch in 2024, does not address it either. The monocle has outlived the show. The monocle has outlived the sequel. The monocle is still hanging from the spine of a book on a shelf in a mystery shack. that exists somewhere in the head of every person who ever watched the show. That little piece of glass is the doorway into all the rest. Because once you start asking about the monocle, you start asking about the journal it hangs from, and once you start asking about the journal, you start asking about the man who wrote it, and once you start asking about him, you start asking about the rocks the man fell into when he came back through the portal, and you start asking about the brother who pulled him out, and the dimension that the brother came from, and the family they both came from, and the parents nobody has ever seen, and the children those parents had, and the children those children had, and the names those grandchildren go by. The little piece of glass swings on its chain, and behind it, the floating cliffs are still humming. The floating cliffs are very old, and the floating cliffs do not float because of gravity. They float for a different reason. We will get there. The crater older than mammals. If you have ever looked at a map of the valley where the show is set, you may have noticed the shape is strange. The town sits inside a perfectly round bowl, surrounded by rock walls that rise on every side. From a distance, the cliffs around the town do not look like normal mountain ridges. They look bent, they look pulled. And along the edge of the basin, big chunks of rock hang in the air, attached to nothing, just floating quietly above the trees, as if the law of gravity simply gave up and went home. The floating cliffs are one of the longest-running visual mysteries in the show. You can spot them in the opening credits. You can spot them in the establishing shots before almost every episode. They are baked into the look of the town, and for the first 2 seasons, nobody on the show even mentions them. The cliffs just hover. Nobody points. Nobody asks. The townspeople walk under floating boulders the size of houses and never look up. Then in Journal 1, which Dipper recovers in Not What He Seems, we get a tease. A page is shown with a sketch of the cliffs and a cipher written along the side. When fans cracked the cipher, the message read, "My compass goes haywire the closer I get to them." Does this mean what I think it does? The answer may be underground. That single line was enough to set the fandom on fire for almost a year. A compass goes haywire near magnets. A compass goes haywire near large amounts of metal. A compass goes haywire near a buried piece of technology so old and so dense that its magnetic field still warps the air around it 300 centuries after the thing went silent. And that is exactly what we eventually learn the answer is. In Dipper and Mabel versus the Future, Ford takes Dipper to a hilltop overlooking the cliffs, holds up a small keychain, and reveals the secret. The cliffs are the rim of a crater. The town sits inside the impact site of a starship. The ship belonged to an alien race known as the pan-dimensional beings of Trilasix Beta, creatures that could exist in 7 to 11 dimensions at once and were known for having horrific senses of direction, and the vessel crashed into Earth approximately 30 million years before the present day. The ship buried itself so deep into the bedrock that the rock above it warped upward in a perfect ring, and pieces of that ring still hover, held up by the residual gravitational field of the alien engine that is still ticking somewhere down below. This is one of those moments the show pulls off again and again. A piece of background scenery you had been staring at for 40 episodes turns out to be the most important visual clue in the entire series. The cliffs are not decoration. The cliffs are a scar. But the answer raises a much bigger question, and it is the question the fandom keeps circling back to. The crater is 30 million years old. The aliens have been dead for 30 million years. So why is Gravity Falls strange now? Why did the weirdness start happening in this century? In this little corner of Oregon, when the ship that supposedly caused all of it has been quiet since long before the first whale ever evolved. 2 camps formed. The first camp says the ship is the cause. The ship is what made the valley weird. Some kind of radiation, some kind of dimensional leak, some kind of buried engine still humming. The weirdness has been there for 30 million years. The humans only showed up recently. We are noticing it now because we are here now. The second camp argues something more unsettling. The second camp argues that the ship did not make the valley weird. The valley made the ship crash. The valley was already weird by some other cause, and the alien vessel was drawn there the way a moth is drawn to a porch light, and then it crashed because the same dimensional instability that makes the valley strange also scrambled the ship's navigation. The Book of Bill leans toward this reading. The book states the weirdness is the reason the crash happened, not the other way around. If the second camp is right, then something else is at the bottom of the valley, something older than 30 million years. Something the ship was flying toward, and the ship is just a wreck on top of it. Like a car crashed on top of a sinkhole that the driver never even saw. This matters because the floating cliffs are not the only piece of buried weirdness in Gravity Falls. There is something else under the town, and Ford has known about it for decades, and he calls it the Nightmare Realm. The Nightmare Realm is not the same as the alien ship. The Nightmare Realm is a different layer of the geography of Gravity Falls. It is the place Bill came from after he destroyed his own dimension. It is the place the interdimensional portal in the basement of the Mystery Shack was built to connect to, and the question of whether the alien ship and the Nightmare Realm have anything to do with each other, whether they are two unrelated weirdnesses sharing the same zip code, or whether they are deeply connected. And the ship was actually trying to land on top of the rift, is a question Hirsch has never closed. It is also worth pointing out something that almost nobody talks about. The town is called Gravity Falls. The cliffs float. The cliffs float because of damaged gravity. The town is named after the broken physics of the place. And the man who named the town is a man we will meet again in this script. A man preserved in a slab of peanut brittle, and a man who rode his horse off a cliff backwards, and a man who has been entirely erased from the official history of the United States, a land born from a fall before we leave the geography of Gravity Falls. There is a fact buried in the Mystery Shack that not enough people stop to think about. Through Ford's investigation of the Great Flood of 1863, he learned that the land the shack was built on was a mass grave of victims from the flood. That is one of the darkest single sentences in the lore. A mass grave. Under the shack, under the home where two 12-year-old children spent their summer, under the porch where Seuss drank pit cola, and the gift shop where Stan sold fake mummies to tourists. There is a layer of bones down there from a flood in 1863, and nobody in the town seems to remember it, and the only person who ever bothered to dig into the story is the same brother who got pulled into the portal in the basement on top of the bones. The Great Flood of 1863 is barely referenced in the show. It is one of those lines you have to dig for. But the fact that Ford's choice to build his lab on top of a mass grave was deliberate, that he picked the property because of what was buried there, has an unsettling kind of logic to it. If the valley is weird, and the weirdness leaks up through the ground, then the soaked, settled, body-rich earth on top of a floodplain is exactly where the weirdness would pool, like blood pooling at the bottom of a bruise. This is one of those threads the show drops in your lap and walks away from. The flood, the graves, the decision to build the lab on top of them. Ford never tells Dipper about any of it. Ford never tells Stan. Ford writes it down in one corner of one journal and moves on. And the people who run the Mystery Shack tours every day are walking back and forth across the resting place of 150 drowned strangers from a century and a half ago, and none of them know. The floating cliffs hum above the trees. The alien engine ticks below the dirt. The bones lie in the layer between, and in the middle of all of it, a shack with a question mark on the roof sells overpriced t-shirts to tourists who have no idea what they are standing on. We have not even gotten to the triangle yet. We have not gotten to the man with 12 fingers. We have not gotten to the brother who took his face. We have only begun. The author's identity, solved and then reopened. For most of the first season and a chunk of the second, the biggest question in the show was the question of who wrote the journals. The journals are the spine of everything Dipper does. The journals are why Dipper goes into the forest. The journals are why Mabel starts noticing what is around her. The journals say trust no one on the inside cover. And they are written by somebody who knew enough about Gravity Falls to fill 3 full books with sketches of monsters and cryptic warnings, and that somebody just vanished one day. The answer arrived in Not What He Seems and got cemented in A Tale of Two Stans. The author is Stanford Pines, Stan's twin brother, a man with 6 fingers on each hand who got pulled into the portal in his own basement. 30 years before the events of the show began, Stan spent those 30 years trying to get him back. Stan succeeded. The mystery got an answer, but the answer cracked open 3 new mysteries the moment it landed. Because once you know Ford wrote the journals, you have to ask why Ford built the portal in the first place. And the answer to that question is that a triangle visited him in his dreams and convinced him to, and the question of who that triangle was and where that triangle came from and what that triangle wanted is the question that drives the rest of the show, the question that drives the Book of Bill, and the question that drives nearly every fan theory ever written about Gravity Falls. We will meet the triangle in a moment. We will meet him properly. Because the dimension he came from is one of the strangest places ever named in a children's cartoon, and the words he screamed at the moment of his destruction are the kind of words that fans have been pulling apart letter by letter for almost 10 years now. The axolotl is listening, the triangle is not gone, and the dream he was selling to Ford, the dream of a doorway between worlds, was a dream he had been selling to humans for thousands of years before Ford ever picked up a pen. The triangle from a flat world. Bill Cipher does not enter the story all at once. He arrives in pieces, the way a bad dream arrives in pieces. You see him in the opening credits, near the end of the theme song, as a yellow triangle floating in the middle of a wheel of symbols. And at first you think he is just background art. You see him in the wallpaper of the Mystery Shack. You see him in the stained glass window of the attic. You see him on the rug under the chair Stan sits in to watch TV. He is everywhere in the show for a full season before any character ever names him. Then, in Dreamscaperers, Lil Gideon Glooful lights a circle of candles, chants in a backwards voice, and Bill Cipher steps out of the firelight for the first time. He is small. He is yellow. He has one eye. He wears a top hat. He sounds like a New York carnival barker who has been smoking for 6,000 years. He calls himself a dream demon. He offers a handshake that burns blue, and from that moment forward, the show belongs to him. The question the show takes a long time to answer is the question of where Bill came from. Where does a creature like that grow up? What family did he have? What sky did he look at as a child? The show gives us hints in Season 2, throws in a half answer in Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, expands it more in Journal 3, and finally, in the Book of Bill released in 2024, gives the dimension a name. Euclidia, also called the second dimension, is the name of Bill Cipher's origin dimension. Inhabited by beings known as Euclideans, it was destroyed almost exactly 1 trillion years ago through unknown means by Bill. A trillion years ago. Stop and sit with that number for a second. The universe is roughly 14 billion years old. A trillion is 1,000 billion. The destruction of Bill's home dimension happened before the universe we live in even existed. Bill is older than time itself. Bill predates the laws of physics that govern the world the Pines family lives in. He is not a demon who showed up to mess with a small Oregon town. He is a refugee from the deep past of reality, a being who watched his own universe burn to the ground. While the universe we know was still a thought in somebody's eye, while the dimension is not shown, Euclidia is said to be a two-dimensional realm, one that three-dimensional minds couldn't process. Its inhabitants take the form of sentient two-dimensional shapes that bump around endlessly within. Their line of scope limited to a flat line of sight, a two-dimensional world. Flat, forever flat. Imagine being a triangle and being told that the only motion you will ever experience is sliding sideways on a sheet of paper for the rest of your life. Imagine knowing that there is a third dimension above you, that things in that direction exist, but that your eyes literally cannot bend that way. Bill grew up in a place where his neighbors could not even comprehend the concept of up. His parents were probably squares or triangles or pentagons. They could not look at him properly. They could only see his edges. They could not see his face. He could not see theirs. This is the part that the fandom keeps returning to. Bill's origin story is the Edwin Abbott novel Flatland flipped into a horror story. Flatland is a Victorian-era satire about a square who discovers a third dimension exists. It is a famous, beloved, gentle book about geometry. And Hirsch took that book, soaked it in nightmare fuel, and asked, what if the square who discovered the third dimension was not delighted by it, but driven mad by it? What if instead of becoming a teacher, the square became an arsonist? What if the square went home, told his neighbors what he had seen, and when they refused to believe him, he set the whole sheet of paper on fire? That is what Bill did. Bill describes Euclidia as flat minds in a flat world with flat dreams, and he calls what he did to it liberation. He openly despised his home and its inhabitants, describing them as flat minds in a flat world with flat dreams, and ultimately liberated the dimension by burning it to the ground. He killed everyone he had ever known. He killed his own parents. The Euclidean Massacre. The phrase the fandom uses for the event, lifted from the lore books, is the Euclidean Massacre. The Book of Bill is the place where this story gets fleshed out, and it is also the place where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. The crime referenced in the poem is further detailed in Journal 3 and the Book of Bill, which state that he caused a catastrophe that resulted in the annihilation of his home dimension Euclidia, known throughout the multiverse as the Euclidean Massacre. Although Bill pejoratively describes the flatland like Euclidia as flat minds in a flat world with flat dreams, the Book of Bill references multiple times the immense guilt he feels and implies the Euclidean Massacre may not have been intentional. Read that sentence twice. The Book of Bill, written from Bill's own perspective, suggests Bill did not mean to do it. The destruction of an entire dimension and everyone Bill ever loved may have been a mistake, an accident, a horrible flash of power Bill could not control. The cocky carnival villain who spent 2 seasons taunting Dipper and Mabel may, at the bottom of all his ego and chaos, be a creature carrying around the worst guilt in the multiverse. He is not the Joker he pretends to be. He is the survivor of a catastrophe he caused and cannot undo. Everything he does in the show, every deal he cuts, every dream he invades, is the behavior of someone running from a memory he cannot outrun. The fandom has been chewing on this since the book came out. The popular reading is that Bill's whole arc, his obsession with the third dimension, his desire to break into the world the Pines family lives in, his goal of unleashing Weirdmageddon, is the behavior of a man who needs to keep moving. Because if he stops, he has to look at what he did. He cannot go home because home does not exist. So he goes everywhere else, forever. And he tries to rip open new dimensions, because new dimensions are places that have not had time to remember him yet. There is a poem about Bill that the show plants in Season 2, and that the show does not pay off until the very end. It is delivered by a giant cosmic axolotl who appears to Mabel and Dipper in a side canon story and recites the following. 60 degrees that come in threes, watches from within birch trees, saw his own dimension burn, misses home and can't return, says he's happy, he's a liar, blame the arson for the fire. If he wants to shirk the blame, he'll have to invoke my name. This suggests that when, before being erased from reality in the series finale, Bill gives a message that when reversed says AXOLOTL. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. He is actually invoking the axolotl for redemption for his crime, and that there is one way to get absolved. He has to take a different form in a different time. This would mean that Bill could return, pause on that line, misses home and can't return. The poem confirms what the Book of Bill later spells out. Bill is homesick. The dream demon who destroys worlds for fun is, underneath all the volume and the violence, a creature who would give anything to be back on his flat sheet of paper with his flat parents and his flat dreams. He cannot be. The sheet is ash. The parents are gone. The only way for Bill to ever go back is if a being more powerful than him grants him another chance. That being is the axolotl, the salamander at the bottom of everything. The axolotl is one of the strangest characters in the entire Gravity Falls universe, and the axolotl never properly appears on the show. The axolotl shows up in a supplementary book called Dipper and Mabel and the Curse of the Time Pirate's Treasure, in the form of a giant cosmic salamander floating somewhere outside of space, watching everything that happens in every dimension at once. The axolotl is described as a god, a real god, an ancient godlike being who oversees reality itself. The axolotl ranks above Bill Cipher in the cosmic pecking order. The axolotl ranks above Time Baby. The axolotl might be the most powerful single entity ever named in the show, and the only thing we ever see the axolotl do is judge Bill. The Book of Bill takes this further. The Book of Bill reveals that because of his final words, Bill is sent to a tank outside of space where a deity known as the axolotl resides. Bill is not dead. Bill is not erased. Bill is being held. He is in some kind of cosmic glass enclosure, watched over by a salamander, older than the universe, waiting for the conditions in the poem to be met. A different form, a different time. This is the cliffhanger the show ends on, whether the show admits it or not. Bill is coming back. Not in this Gravity Falls. Maybe not in this dimension. Maybe, but somewhere, sometime, in a body that does not look like a triangle, in a place that is not Oregon, in a moment when no one is watching. Bill will step out of the axolotl's tank and start again. The poem says he can. The book says he is waiting. The fandom has been writing fanfic about it for 10 years. And here's the question. The fandom keeps asking. The question Hirsch has never directly answered. The poem says Bill needs a different form, a different time. What form? What time? Is Bill going to come back as a human? Is Bill going to come back as a child? Is Bill going to come back as one of us? Is Bill in some other dimension running parallel to ours already back? Is he reading this script with you? Is he the reason you're awake at 3 in the morning, watching a video about Gravity Falls when you should be sleeping? This is the kind of thing the show plants in your head and walks away from. There's no follow-up episode. There's no reveal. There's just the salamander and the tank and the silence. The name that evaporates. There is one more piece of Bill's mystery that almost never gets brought up, and it is one of the most beautiful and disturbing pieces of lore in the show. Bill Cipher is not Bill Cipher's real name. Due to his lack of a corporeal form in the third dimension, Bill could only influence the world by accessing the dreams of its inhabitants and making deals with them, a pursuit which caused him to adopt the name Bill Cipher for ease of communication, as his true name would evaporate one with an expression of horror and ecstasy on their face. Bill's real name cannot be spoken. The real name, if heard by a human ear, kills the person hearing it. They do not just die, they evaporate. They turn to dust with a look on their face that is somehow both horror and ecstasy at the same time. The lore is very specific about this, both emotions together, as if the name is so terrible and so beautiful that the human body cannot contain the experience of hearing it and simply ceases to be. Think about that for a moment. The yellow triangle who taunts 12-year-olds and makes deals with greedy uncles has a true name that is essentially a weapon of mass destruction, a name that kills with awe. And the only reason Bill goes by Bill Cipher is because he is dumbing himself down, so the people he wants to make deals with can speak to him without dying first. This is the kind of detail that makes Gravity Falls, Gravity Falls. The throwaway lines are the lore. The lore is the throwaway lines. And the fandom has been writing essays about what Bill's true name might be for years. Some fans think it is unpronounceable. Some fans think it is in a language that does not exist yet. Some fans think it is the sound a star makes when it dies. Hirsch has never said. The triangle came from a flat world he burned. He took a fake name so humans could survive his presence. He spent thousands of years whispering into the dreams of every greedy or lonely or brilliant person in Gravity Falls, building toward a portal that would let him pour into the third dimension. He used Ford. He used Gideon. He very nearly used Dipper. And when he finally lost, in the moment his physical form was crumbling to ash inside the mind of his oldest enemy, the last thing he did was say the name of a salamander god backwards and beg for a second chance. We do not know if he is going to get it. We do not know if he has already gotten it. We do not know if the next person reading this script is him. The cliffs hum. The journal sits on the shelf. The monocle swings. And somewhere outside of space, in a tank of liquid that does not exist anywhere in our laws of physics, a giant salamander is watching a triangle wait. The name behind the constellation. There is a child in Gravity Falls with a birthmark on his forehead, in the exact shape of the Big Dipper. 7 dots arranged the way the stars are arranged. He combs his hair down to cover it. He has been told the birthmark looks like the constellation since he was small, and the nickname stuck so hard that by the time he was 12, almost no one in his life called him anything else. Even his sister calls him by the nickname. His real name is not Dipper. The show makes that clear in Double Dipper, where in a quiet exchange with Wendy, Dipper confirms that the name is a nickname, and the name his parents gave him at birth is something else. He does not say what it is. He just smiles and shrugs, and the scene moves on. For the rest of the show, the real name is a hole, a blank space, a piece of the character that is technically missing. For almost 4 years, between the airing of Double Dipper in Season 1 and the publication of the physical Journal 3 book after the show ended, the fandom invented possibilities. Hundreds of them. Some fans were convinced the name was Michael because Hirsch once said in passing that Dipper's name was similar to Mabel's, and the M was the most obvious connection. Other fans pushed for Roderick because of the Big Dipper's old folk nickname, the Plow, and Roderick's old etymology as famous ruler of the sky. Other fans pushed for Dominic, Dennis, Daniel, Damien. Other fans went the joke route and proposed Dipperton, Dipperson III, which got circulated as a meme and then died. The answer arrived in the physical release of Journal 3 in 2016, after the show was officially over. This was officially confirmed in the physical release of Journal 3, where Ford writes that Dipper's real name is Mason Pines, a name Dipper apparently disliked, leading to the use of his nickname, Mason Pines. The reaction in the fandom was mixed. Some people loved it. Mason fit the pattern. Mason and Mabel both start with M. Both have soft, almost identical syllabic shape. The names match in the way Hirsch always said they would match, and Mason carries a quiet symbolism. A Mason is a builder of secrets, a builder of stone, the Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel. The secret society Stan's father belonged to is modeled on the Masonic lodges. The name Mason ties Dipper, by syllables alone, to the secret history of his own family. Other fans hated it. The name felt small. After 4 years of speculation about what dramatic, secret-laden name a boy with a constellation on his forehead could possibly be hiding, the answer was just Mason. 2 syllables, common, plain. Some people argued that Hirsch picked it specifically to deflate the speculation, that the whole point of the reveal was to remind the fandom that Dipper is just a kid, not a chosen one, and his birth name should reflect that. Other people argued that Hirsch picked it because of the building symbolism. Other people argued that Hirsch picked it because he just liked the name. Either way, Mason Pines is officially canon. The mystery is solved on paper, but the mystery is, in a strange way, still unsolved on the screen, because the show itself never says the name. The show never has Mabel call him Mason. The show never has the parents call him Mason. The show never has a flashback where a doctor hands a baby with 7 freckles on his forehead to a mother who whispers Mason into his ear. The reveal lives entirely in a tie-in book. For people who watched only the show, Dipper's real name is still technically unknown. The reveal is on paper, the mystery is on screen. Both are still true at the same time, and that is one of the strange ongoing features of Gravity Falls lore. The show ended, but the lore did not. The show is a 38-episode artifact frozen in time. The lore keeps growing. Journal 3 added pages of canon. The Book of Bill added a dimension's worth of canon. Side comics added more canon. Hirsch keeps dropping pieces. And whether you count those pieces as real depends on whether you are a watcher or a reader. The parents who never show up. The Pines twins have parents. Of course they have parents. They were sent to Gravity Falls by their parents in the first place. The whole premise of the show is that 2 California children were shipped off to Oregon to spend the summer with their great uncle because their mother and father wanted them out of the house for 3 months. Mr. and Mrs. Pines are the unseen parents of Dipper and Mabel Pines. During the summer of 2012, they send the twins to Gravity Falls, Oregon, to spend the summer with their great-uncle Stan, unseen. That word is doing a lot of work. The parents are mentioned. The twins' father is mentioned throughout Fight Fighters by Rumble McSkirmish, who believes that Robbie killed him. However, it is made clear by Dipper that this was a lie and that their father is in fact alive and well. In the deep end, Mabel shows Mermando a picture of the family kickboxing. In Gideon Rises, Stan tries to reassure Dipper and Mabel's parents over the phone that their children are doing fine, claiming that they are staying at a 4-star hotel, though they are actually staying at Abuelita's rundown house. Mabel mentions their mother in Mailbox, as she wishes to send her a video of her sticking 100 gummy worms up her nose. The parents exist. The parents are alive. The parents kickbox. The parents are referenced, photographed, phone called, talked about. But the parents never appear on screen. Not once. Not in a flashback. Not in a phone shot. Not even in the opening credits, where you can briefly see two adult arms loading luggage into a car, but never the faces above the arms. Why? There is no in-universe answer. Hirsch has hinted in interviews that this was deliberate, that he wanted the parents to be background figures, so that the audience would focus on the great uncles as the real adult presences in the twins' lives. The grunkles are the parental figures the show cares about. The actual parents are out of frame on purpose, because the actual parents are not the story. But the fandom never accepted that as a full answer. The fandom has been picking at the parent gap for over a decade. Some fans think the parents are deliberately hidden because they look like an existing character in the show, and revealing them would spoil a connection. Some fans think the parents are part of a future story Hirsch has been keeping in his back pocket. Some fans think the parents are dead and the show is lying about it, that the phone calls are with Stan, that Mabel's photo is old, that the kickboxing happened years ago. This is a minority theory, but a stubborn one. The most popular theory, the one the Tumblr fandom from 2015 circled around for a long time, is that the parents are simply normal. Hirsch is hiding them because revealing them would be anticlimactic. The kids' parents are some accountant and some dental hygienist who live in Piedmont, California, eat dinner at 6, vote in local elections, and have absolutely nothing to do with the supernatural side of the family. The mystery is not what the parents are hiding. The mystery is that the parents are boring, and revealing them would break the spell, so Hirsch never does. But this raises a follow-up question that the fandom keeps returning to. If the parents are normal, then how did the Pines bloodline produce two sets of twins in a row? Twins are genetic, and the gene can skip generations. Stan and Ford are twins. Dipper and Mabel are twins. The intermediate generation, Shermie, the great uncle of the kids and the brother of Stan and Ford, did not produce twins, but the gene skipped him and showed up in his grandchild. And the show has hinted, especially in the Cipher Wheel and in Bill's prophecy, that there is something deeply structural about twin pairs in the Pines family. The Pines twins are not coincidence. They are pattern. Bill knows it. Bill exploits it. Bill picks Stan and Ford specifically because they are twins, because their mirrored existence creates the kind of psychological wound he can drive a wedge into. And in the next generation, Bill almost picks Dipper and Mabel for the same reason. Twin energy is somehow weaponizable in Gravity Falls. And the parents in Piedmont, California, are the link between the two generations of weaponizable twins. They are the bridge. They are the people who somehow produced another mirrored pair, and they are the people the show refuses to let us look at. The fandom is not done with them. The parents are still a mystery. The twin gene is still a mystery. And whether Mason and Mabel are going to produce their own twins someday, sending the cycle into another loop, is a question Hirsch could answer in a single line of dialogue and chooses deliberately never to answer. Wendy's mother. There is another parent the show never shows you, and her absence is, if anything, even louder than the absence of the Pines' parents. Wendy Corduroy is the 15-year-old cashier at the Mystery Shack, Dipper's first big crush, and one of the most fleshed-out side characters in the show. We meet her father, Manly Dan. In the very first episodes, Manly Dan is a giant lumberjack with a beard like a hedge and arms like cinder blocks who punches trees for stress relief. We meet Wendy's brothers, who are tiny clones of Manly Dan, miniature lumberjacks running around the yard. The Corduroy household is established as a thoroughly masculine, thoroughly chaotic, thoroughly logger household, but there is no mother in the picture. Wendy's mother is never mentioned. Wendy's mother is never seen. Wendy's mother is never photographed in a frame in the Corduroy house. There is no offhand line about how Mom would have loved this or back when Mom was around. The mother is not absent the way the Pines' parents are absent, which is to say present but off-screen. The mother is absent the way a person is absent who is no longer alive or who left a very long time ago. There's not much to say on the subject of Wendy's mom because there's not much to go on. Never has she once been mentioned or alluded to on the show so far. What most fans want to know is, what happened to her? Did she die, disappear? Luckily, there's a good chance this mystery will be brought up and hopefully explained in a possible Wendy story arc delving into more of Wendy's history. The Wendy story arc never happened. The show ended. The Book of Bill did not address it. Wendy's mother remains the longest unaddressed absence in the show. The fandom theories here are darker than the Pines parents' theories. The leading theory is that Wendy's mother died. The leading evidence is that Manly Dan, despite being a comic relief character, has a quiet sadness to him in certain scenes, and that Wendy herself has a hardened, world-weary quality that is unusual for a 15-year-old. The way she handles fear, the way she handles disappointment, the way she does not flinch when supernatural things happen, all point toward a kid who has already had to deal with something heavy in her life. A kid who had to grow up faster than her brothers did. A kid who took over the female role in the household when she was very small. There is a secondary theory that Wendy's mother is alive, but divorced from Manly Dan, and lives somewhere far away. This theory is less popular because nobody in the household ever mentions her, and divorced kids generally do mention their other parent at least once, even just to complain. There is a third theory, the strangest one, that ties Wendy's mother into the weirdness of the town. This theory points to Wendy's casual, almost native comfort with the supernatural side of Gravity Falls. Wendy is never afraid of the monsters. Wendy treats the Mystery Shack as a normal job. Wendy fights ghosts in the Northwest Mansion without breaking a sweat. Some fans have argued that Wendy's mother was somebody who knew the town's secrets, somebody connected to the older generation of weird researchers, maybe even somebody who knew Ford back in the 80s. The theory gets thin pretty quickly, but the comfort Wendy has with the strangeness of the town is real, and it has to come from somewhere. Hirsch has never confirmed any version. Wendy's mother is gone. Wendy's mother is unmentioned. And the fact that the show, which is so careful about lore, which plants clues 4 seasons in advance, which puts answers in book form years after the show ends, has never even hinted at Wendy's mother in any of its supplementary material, suggests one of two things. Either the answer is so dark that Hirsch decided not to put it into a children's show, or the answer is so unimportant that Hirsch never bothered. Both are possible. Both are true to the show's pattern. The kids stay quiet about it. The father stays quiet about it. The town stays quiet about it. And somewhere in the corduroy house, presumably there is a photo album with a face nobody has ever asked Wendy to talk about, and a 15-year-old girl who has learned, very early in her life, that some questions just do not get answered. The journal sits on Dipper's bed, the monocle swings, Mabel is in the next room, asleep with her pig. Somewhere in California, 2 parents who have never been seen on camera are eating dinner. Somewhere in Oregon, a girl with red hair is sitting on the roof of the Mystery Shack at night, looking at the cliffs, thinking about something she does not say out loud. And somewhere underneath all of them, the pawn shop on Glass Shard Beach is still in the Pines family memory. The pawn shop where 2 twin boys grew up. The pawn shop with the broken science fair project. The pawn shop where one brother got kicked out into the rain, and the other brother spent the rest of his life trying to forgive him for it. We are going to talk about that pawn shop. We are going to talk about the science fair project. And we are going to talk about the question of who actually broke it, which is one of the quietest, most domestic mysteries in the entire show. And one of the ones that has driven the most fanfic of any, the broken project in the basement. There is a moment in A Tale of Two Stands that breaks the Pines family in half, and the moment hinges on a single object. It is a science fair project. It is a perpetual motion machine. It is the work of months, maybe years, built by a 16-year-old Stanford Pines for a national science competition that was going to win him a full scholarship to a college called West Coast Tech. The project sits on a workbench in the back of the family pawn shop on Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey, draped in a sheet, glowing quietly. The project is Ford's ticket out of the working-class life his father has been preparing him for. The project is the doorway to everything Ford wants to be. The night before the competition, the project breaks. The brothers go down to the basement together. Ford lifts the sheet, the machine is cracked. A single component has been knocked out of place, and the whole structure has collapsed in on itself. Ford turns to Stan. Stan looks horrified. Stan denies it. Ford does not believe him. Their father comes downstairs. Their father decides Stan did it on purpose because Stan was jealous of Ford's chance to leave. Their father throws Stan out of the house. Stan has nowhere to go. Stan ends up living out of a car. Stan ends up living 1,000 other lives, under 1,000 other names, in 1,000 other towns, for the next 10 years, until he eventually crashes through the door of a house in Oregon, owned by a twin brother who has not spoken to him in a decade and a half. The broken project is the inciting incident of the entire Pines family tragedy. Without the broken project, Stan never leaves home. Without the broken project, Stan never ends up in Gravity Falls. Without the broken project, Ford never invites Stan to the cabin 30 years later. Without that invitation, Ford never gets pushed into the portal. Without the portal, no Dipper, no Mabel, no Bill, no Weird Mageddon. The whole show is structurally a domino chain that starts with a single cracked science fair project in a pawn shop basement in 1975. And the question the show never definitively answers is, did Stan actually break it? The show's official position, as established in A Tale of Two Stans, is that Stan did break the project, but he did it by accident. The flashback shows young Stan in the basement, alone fiddling with the machine, accidentally knocking the critical piece loose. He never tells anyone. He lets his father blame him for breaking it on purpose. He carries the guilt for 30 years. When he finally tells Ford the truth in the present day, it is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the whole series. So the case is closed, right? The fandom never accepted it as closed. There is a stubborn theory, which has been kicking around since 2015, that says Stan did not break the project at all. The theory has multiple variants, but the core claim is that Stan's flashback memory of breaking the machine is either incomplete, manipulated, or planted by something else. The most extreme version of the theory says Bill Cipher was in the basement that night. Bill was already maneuvering. Bill needed Ford and Stan to be separated because a unified Pines twin pair would be too dangerous to his plans. So Bill subtly influenced the moment, broke the machine, and let Stan take the fall. The evidence for this theory is thin but suggestive. Bill mentions in his AMA, the in-universe interview Hirsch published online during the show's run, that he had been watching the Pines family for a very long time before he ever made his deal with Ford. Bill says he chose his targets carefully. Bill says he sometimes plants seeds early, and the broken project in this reading is one of those seeds. The softer version of the theory does not require Bill at all. The softer version says the project broke on its own. Perpetual motion machines do not work in real physics. Even if Ford built something brilliant, even if Ford built something that genuinely violated the laws of thermodynamics, the machine would still have been an unstable piece of engineering, on a workbench in a damp pawn shop basement. The vibrations of the building, the temperature changes overnight, the wood shifting in the floor above could have knocked the part loose. Stan walked into the basement, saw the broken machine, panicked, and assumed he must have done something. The flashback is Stan's memory. The memory is wrong. The machine broke itself, and a 16-year-old took the blame for the rest of his life. This version has a quiet emotional weight to it that the show itself never engages with. If the machine broke on its own, then Philbrick's decision to throw Stan out was based on a misreading. The whole tragedy of the Pines family is built on top of a misunderstanding nobody ever bothered to investigate. That is a kind of horror the show does not name, but it is consistent with the show's general theme. Gravity Falls is full of moments where the actual truth is less dramatic than what people believe, and the believing is what causes all the damage. Either way, the question of whether Stan actually broke the project lives in a corner of the fandom that has not gone quiet. Some fans want Hirsch to confirm one reading or the other. Hirsch has not. The basement scene, the cracked machine, the father's verdict, all of it stays sealed. In the version of the story Stan tells 30 years later in a fishing boat in the middle of the night. And whether the version is true is ultimately a question nobody alive in the story can answer. The other brother. There is a third Pines sibling, and most people forget he exists. His name is Shermy Pines, and he is the grandfather of Dipper and Mabel. He is the brother of Stan and Ford. He is the link in the chain between the twin generation of the 1950s and the twin generation of the 2010s. And he is one of the most mysterious characters in the show, because the show never properly shows him. We see Shermy exactly once in a flashback in Sock Opera, where he appears as a baby being held by an older version of Stan and Ford's mother. We see his name come up briefly in family photographs, We see Stan reference him once or twice, and that is it. Shermie is a footnote in his own family. Here is what we know. Shermie grew up. Shermie had at least one child, who became the father of Dipper and Mabel. Shermie produced the Pines parents the show refuses to show on screen. And Shermie himself, the link in the chain, the grandfather, the man who carries the family name forward, is also off-screen for the entire show. He never visits, he never calls. He is never in a photograph the twins look at. He is, for all intents and purposes, gone. Some fans have argued Shermie is dead. The math sort of supports this. If Shermie was a baby in the late 1950s, he would be in his 50s by 2012, which is not old enough to be definitely dead, but old enough that an unexplained absence is plausible. The Pines twins never mention a living grandfather. They mention parents. They mention great-uncles. They never mention grandparents. The grandparents on the Pines side are simply not in the conversation. The bigger question is the one that the Tumblr theorists in 2014 were chewing on. Long before A Tale of Two Stans aired, Shermie is the link in the genetic chain. The twin gene that produced Stan and Ford, and that skipped Shermie, came back in Shermie's grandchild, which means Shermie was a carrier. Shermie passed the gene to his son or daughter, who passed it to the twins. The Pines twin lineage runs through Shermie like a current, and Shermie himself is the one Pines we know almost nothing about. What if Shermie was the normal one? What if the entire family weirdness, the secret societies, the supernatural research, the dimensional portals, all of it skipped Shermie too, the way the twin gene skipped him? What if Shermie grew up in the same house as Stan and Ford, watched everything that happened, watched his older brothers ruin each other, and quietly decided to be the boring one, to never write a journal, to never invent anything, to get a normal job, marry a normal person, have a normal kid, and let the chaos burn itself out? That is one of the most popular fan readings of Shermie. He is the break. He is the family member who applied the break. And his absence from the show is not a mystery to be solved, but a deliberate choice he made. Shermie chose to be off camera. Shermie chose to never be in the photo album. Shermie's whole life, he watched the Pines name turn into a curse, and he stepped sideways out of the frame and let it burn without him. The fandom likes this reading because it gives Shermie dignity. It makes him not a forgotten plot hole, but a quiet, deliberate survivor. The man who looked at his twin brothers and decided, that is not for me. The man who passed the twin gene forward by accident and then prayed it would skip his own kid. The man who, when his grandchildren got sent up to Oregon for the summer, did not say a word about what they were walking into, because he had spent 50 years pretending he did not know. Philbrick's other life. While we are in the pawn shop, there is one more figure who deserves a moment. The father, Philbrick Pines, is the father of the Pines twins, and Philbrick is one of the most stoic characters ever animated. He almost never smiles. He almost never speaks above a low growl. He runs the pawn shop on Glass Shard Beach with an iron grip. He throws his own son out of the house at 16 and never lets him back in. He is, in every scene we see him, the kind of father who breaks his children quietly and goes back to reading the newspaper. And he was a member of a secret society. It was revealed in Gravity Falls, Journal 3, that Philbrick Pines was a member of the Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel, so Stan likely acquired the items from him. Philbrick had originally given his fez to Ford Pines, believing that Ford would join the order, but when Stan took over the house, he took the hat to use as a showman. The fez. The famous fez. The fez Stan wears in every single episode of the show, every tour of the Mystery Shack, every grainy promo photo Disney ever put out. That fez was not Stan's. The fez originally belonged to Philbrick. Philbrick gave the fez to Ford, the smart son, the son he believed was going to make it in the world, because Philbrick wanted Ford to follow him into the Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel. Ford never joined. Ford never wore the fez. The fez sat in the Pines house until Stan years later, after Ford had vanished into the portal, found it, and put it on and started doing tours at the Mystery Shack. The Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel is one of the strangest, dumbest, most layered jokes in the show. Stan reveals that the group was a Masonic lodge and that it was just a bunch of old guys who worshipped like a fish in a tank. On the surface, it is a joke. A bunch of old men in a basement worshipping a fish. Hirsch is making fun of the Shriners, the real-world Masonic offshoot known for the red fez and the silly parades. But on a second pass, the Royal Order is not entirely a joke. The Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel congratulates you for coming this far. Now, get lost. Highlighting this text shows a code WKHVBROV KDYHPHDQLQJ. Caesar for the symbols have meaning. The Royal Order has symbols. The Royal Order has codes. The Royal Order is connected to the cipher wheel. Their logo, the symbol on Stan's fez, appears on the wheel itself in the opening credits. The cipher wheel is the prophecy that defeats Bill Cipher, which means Philbrick Pines, the cold father of the Pines twins, was a member of a secret society whose symbol appears on the most important prophecy in the entire show. That is not nothing. That is a thread the show plants and does not pull on. What did Philbrick know? Did Philbrick know about the weirdness of Gravity Falls before Ford ever moved there? Did Philbrick know about Bill Cipher? Was the Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel, despite Stan's dismissive description, a real organization that had been tracking the supernatural for generations, and Philbrick was a low-ranking member. And Philbrick wanted Ford to join because Ford was the son with the brain to do something with the membership. The show does not say the show plays it all for laughs, but the fez sits on Stan's head for 38 episodes, and the symbol on the fez is on the wheel, and the wheel is the thing that wins the war. And the man who originally owned that fez is dead, presumably, and he never said a word to either of his sons about what the symbol meant. He just handed it over and waited to see what they would do with it. The pawn shop is still there. The basement is still there. The science fair project is still cracked. Philbrick is gone. Shermie is gone. The fez is in Oregon. The twins are old men sailing the Stano War II somewhere in the Arctic. And in California, two parents who have never been seen on camera are putting their twin children to bed in a house that is, in some small biological way, the inheritor of the same gene that started everything. The pattern keeps repeating. The Pines family keeps making twins. The cipher wheel keeps spinning. And somewhere underneath the floor of an Oregon shack, a portal that has been deactivated still hums faintly, waiting for someone to plug it back in. We will talk about the portal next. We will talk about Ford's 30 years inside it. We will talk about the multiverse he saw. And we will talk about the question of what else came through with him when he came home. 30 years on the other side. There is a man who fell into a doorway in 1982 and came out of the same doorway in 2012. The man went in young. The man came out old. The man walked into the basement of his own house, wearing his own clothes, and he walked out of the basement wearing armor stitched together from materials that do not exist on Earth, carrying weapons that do not appear in any catalog in any country, and speaking with a voice that sounded like a voice that had not used the English language in a very long time. Stanford Pines spent 30 years inside the portal, 30 years across the multiverse, 30 years inside a sequence of dimensions that the show only ever shows in flashes. On the other side of the swirling blue gate, his brother spent 3 decades trying to reopen. We see him fall in at the end of Not What He Seems. We see him climb out at the start of A Tale of Two Stans. Between those two moments, in the timeline of the show, 3 decades of his life passed. And the show never properly tells us what happened in those 3 decades. We get hints. Ford mentions in passing that he saw dimensions where physics did not work the same way. He mentions fighting in arenas. He mentions a price on his head in multiple star systems. He mentions allies briefly and enemies briefly, and a tattoo somewhere on his body he refuses to elaborate on. He carries scars. He carries a quantum destabilizer that can erase a person from existence. He carries a journal full of writing he has not yet shown to anyone. And he carries a wariness, a constant looking over his shoulder. That is the body language of a man who has been hunted for a very long time. 30 years, most of an adult life, spent jumping from dimension to dimension, alone, eating things that do not have names, sleeping in places that do not have surfaces. Ford was 32 when he fell in. Ford was 62 when he climbed out. He missed his entire adulthood. He missed every relationship he might have had. He missed every chance at a normal life. He came home to a brother who had spent the same 3 decades trying to bring him back, and the first thing he did was punch that brother in the face. The show structurally does not have time to deal with what happened in those 30 years. The show has to keep moving. The kids have to keep being 12. Bill has to keep advancing his plan. So the 30 years sit in the background like a closed box. The box gets opened in the supplementary material partially. The Book of Bill gives us pieces. The expanded edition of Journal 3 gives us pieces. But the show itself leaves the box closed, and inside the box, the fandom has been guessing for years. The dimensions Ford visited. The clearest glimpse we get is in Weirdmageddon Part 1. When Ford explains to the kids what he has been doing, he says he traveled across dimensions, hunting Bill, gathering information, building tools. He says he learned that Bill had been planning Weirdmageddon for a very long time, that Bill had tried to escape the nightmare realm many times before, and that every time Bill had tried, somebody had stopped him. Ford is the latest in a long line of people who have stood in Bill's way. He is not the first. He will not be the last. The Book of Bill expands this dramatically. The book lists, in fragmentary form, the names of beings Bill made deals with across history. Some of them are humans, scattered across thousands of years of Earth history in different countries and different centuries, who Bill used to try to open small windows between the nightmare realm and our dimension. This theory has a continuity error in that birch trees specifically being plural, and with a space between meaning it more likely the line is referring to actual birch trees instead. The line about saw his own dimension burn, misses home and can't return, may refer to Bill Cipher regretting his decision to destroy his home dimension as told in Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls. The most famous of these is a man named Silas Birchtree. Silas Birchtree was one of Bill's earlier human pawns. Somebody Bill tried to use to build a portal long before Ford ever showed up in Gravity Falls. The line in the axolotl poem about watches from within birch trees is, according to the more recent theories, a reference to this man. Silas Birchtree is a piece of the puzzle that connects Bill's history on Earth to the larger history of the Pines family and the larger history of the Cipher Wheel. He is not the first human Bill ever tried to use. He is just the one we have a name for. How many of these did Ford run into during his 30 years? How many forgotten Pines equivalents in other dimensions did Ford meet? How many alternate versions of himself did he see? The multiverse, by definition, contains infinite versions of everyone. There's a dimension where Ford never fell into the portal. There is a dimension where Stan fell instead. There is a dimension where neither of them existed. There is a dimension where they were a single twin, fused at birth. Ford spent 30 years walking through these. Ford saw versions of his own life that should not be possible to see. And Ford never, in any episode of the show, sits down and tells anyone what he saw. This is one of the saddest unsolved pieces of the show, in a quiet way. The man came home with a lifetime of stories and never told them. The Book of Bill has Bill mocking Ford about this, saying that Ford does not talk about his 30 years because the memories are too much. The book implies Ford is broken in ways nobody in the show is willing to look at. Stan does not ask. The kids do not ask. By the time the show ends, Ford and Stan are sailing off into the Arctic on their boat, and presumably, somewhere on those long, quiet nights at sea, Ford tells his brother some of what happened. But the audience never gets to listen. The things that came back with him. Here's a question the show plants and never resolves. When Ford came back through the portal, did he come back alone? The portal is, structurally, a hole between two places. The portal connects the basement of the Mystery Shack to the Nightmare Realm, and through the Nightmare Realm to the rest of the multiverse. When Ford came back, the portal was open. The portal stayed open for a few seconds. Anything within reach of the portal on the other side could, theoretically, have come through with him. We know one thing came through. We know Bill himself eventually escaped the Nightmare Realm and entered the third dimension. We know that happened in Weirdmageddon Part 1, when Bill used a separate ritual involving Blendin Blandin to break through. So Bill did not come through with Ford. Bill came later. But what about smaller things? What about parasites? What about microbes? What about dust? What about a single piece of Nightmare Realm matter that hitched a ride on the inside of Ford's coat and dropped onto the floor of the basement when he stepped out of the portal and lay there in the dark, multiplying? This is one of the fandom's quieter horror theories. The theory says some of the weirdness in Gravity Falls in the months after Ford came back is leakage from the portal opening event. Things that came through, things that should not have come through. The fandom points to small, unexplained moments in the back half of Season 2, weird visual anomalies, weird character behaviors, weird background details, as evidence. Nothing definitive, just enough to make a person watch the show a third time. The leakage theory connects to something bigger, which is the question of what the multi-bear actually is. The multi-bear is a creature with many bear heads that lives in a cave in the Gravity Falls forest. The multi-bear shows up in Dipper vs. Manliness. The multi-bear is treated by the show as just another local monster, like the Gobblewonker or the Hide-Behind. But the multi-bear is structurally not like the other monsters. The multi-bear has multiple heads, multiple consciousnesses, and a strangely philosophical worldview. The multi-bear listens to Baba, the in-universe ABBA equivalent, with deep emotional resonance. The multi-bear is, in some readings, a creature that exists across multiple dimensions at once, the way the pan-dimensional beings from the buried ship exist across 7 to 11 dimensions. The multi-bear might not be from Earth. The multi-bear might be a refugee, like Ford was a refugee from the multiverse. This is the kind of speculation the show invites. The show plants enough oddness in its background that almost any creature could be retroactively framed as something more than it appears. The multi-bear is one example. The Hand Witch is another. The Lake Monster, even if its first appearance is debunked as a McGucket invention, is treated in later episodes as if something larger is actually in the lake. The lake is huge. The lake connects to other water systems. What lives at the bottom of Lake Gravity Falls? The show never properly says. And the unifying question, the question the fandom has been throwing around for years, is whether the weirdness of Gravity Falls is one phenomenon or many. Is everything caused by the buried alien ship? Is everything caused by the proximity to the Nightmare Realm? Is everything caused by some third thing? Some deeper weirdness? Some original sin of the valley that predates both the ship and the rift? The show plants pieces of all three possibilities. The show resolves none of them. The Society of the Blind Eye and their purpose. There's a group in Gravity Falls whose entire existence is built around the idea that the weirdness is too much for normal people to live with. The group is called the Society of the Blind Eye, and the group was founded by a man named Fiddleford H. McGucket. In the late 1970s, after McGucket saw something through the prototype version of Ford's portal that he could not unsee, McGucket built a memory gun. McGucket erased his own memory of what he had seen. McGucket then offered to erase the memories of anyone else in Gravity Falls who had encountered something weird and wanted to forget it. After seeing a label for McGucket Labs on the ruined laptop, Dipper suspects that Old Man McGucket might actually be the author. Unfortunately, McGucket himself isn't sure, since his memory was erased by the mysterious Society of the Blind Eye. As it turns out, Fiddleford McGucket was actually an assistant to the author and created both the memory gun and the society after being unable to cope with the town's weirdness. The society grew, the society added members. The society became, by the time of the show, a hooded cult of townspeople who met in a cave under the town museum and erased the memories of anyone who knew too much. The kids dismantled the society in Society of the Blind Eye. In the middle of Season 2, the society's members get their own memories erased and walk out of the cave with no idea who they used to be. But the question the show never fully answers is what the society was actually for. The surface answer is that the society was a coping mechanism for people who could not handle the weirdness. The deeper answer, which some fans push, is that the society was not just a cult. The society was a containment effort. The society was in some way keeping the weirdness inside Gravity Falls. Every memory the society erased was a story that did not leave the town. Every tourist whose strange encounter was scrubbed was a person who did not write a blog post about Gravity Falls and bring the world's attention down on the valley. If you think about it that way, the society was not McGucket's failure. The society was McGucket's quietest masterpiece. By erasing memories, the society kept Gravity Falls off the map of the wider world. The society kept the weirdness local. The society protected the town from outside investigation, from government attention, from the kind of national news cycle that would have flooded Gravity Falls with curious researchers and conspiracy nuts, and made the place uninhabitable. When the kids dismantle the society in Season 2, they do not just liberate a few townspeople, they open the door for everything that comes after. The memories are not contained anymore. The stories can spread. And by the time of Weirdmageddon, when actual reality starts breaking apart in the streets of the town, there is no society left to scrub the witnesses. The whole world sees pieces of it. The whole world has to be told, by Bill Cipher's own dimensional barrier, that what is happening in Gravity Falls is just a localized weather phenomenon before the world will move on and forget. The Society of the Blind Eye is one of those plot threads that the show solves on the surface and complicates underneath. The cult is gone. The function the cult served, of keeping Gravity Falls invisible, is gone too. And the question of who is keeping the town invisible now, in the post-show universe, in the years after Weirdmageddon, is a question the show does not answer. Somebody must be. Gravity Falls is still off the map. Gravity Falls is still strange. And somewhere, in the basement of some other townsperson, somebody else has built a new memory gun. Somebody has to have. The portal is sealed. Ford and Stan are at sea. The Mystery Shack is now owned by Seuss Ramirez, who runs it the way Stan ran it, with the same fake exhibits and the same overpriced tickets. The tourists keep coming. The cliffs keep humming. And the question of what is still leaking out of the cracks in the ground. 3 decades after Ford first fell in, is a question the show pretends has been answered, but has not been. The president in the peanut brittle there is a man encased in a slab of solid peanut brittle who has been sleeping in the dark for 150 years. He was a president. He was the president before the president. The history books say came next. He won his election in a literal landslide that killed all the other candidates. He banned pants. He appointed 6 babies to the Supreme Court. He waged war on pancakes. He rode horses backwards. And when his administration got too embarrassing for the rest of the country to tolerate, he was quietly removed from office. All mention of him was scrubbed from the federal record, and he founded a town in the wilderness of Oregon by crashing into a valley on the back of a galloping horse. His name is Quentin Tremblay III, and he is the founder of Gravity Falls. Quentin Tremblay III is the forgotten founder of Gravity Falls, Oregon, and the 8.5th President of the United States of America, whose silliness has prompted his erasure from history. When he was young, he met George Washington, who, according to Tremblay, chased him around and spanked him with a paddle for 3 hours. Decades later, he won the 1,837 presidential election due to an actual landslide that killed all the other candidates, hence becoming the 8.5th President of the United States. The show treats Tremblay as a joke. The episode he appears in, Irrational Treasure, is one of the most cartoonish episodes in the whole run. Tremblay is a goofy, pantsless, peanut brittle-encased weirdo who shouts non-sequiturs and gets hit by trains, and survives because he is so silly the universe has stopped trying to kill him. The audience laughs. The kids laugh. Mabel laughs. Tremblay becomes a beloved background figure in the show's mythology, and that is where most viewers leave him. But the implications of his story are huge. If Tremblay is real, then the official history of the United States is wrong. Let it here be recorded that Nathaniel Northwest, famous in his native Gravity Falls, for standing in the park and hitting himself with a large boating oar until he blacked out, was chosen to become the patsy mayor of Gravity Falls. Northwest spoke in a series of grunts and screams, and often yelled his trademark phrase, "I am going to eat this entire oak tree because I am a powerful wizard." William Henry Harrison's 30-day presidency, the famous shortest term in American history, was actually a cover-up for the brief tenure of an eccentric man who had to be erased to protect the dignity of the office. Nathaniel Northwest, the supposed founder of Gravity Falls, the great-great-grandfather of Pacifica Northwest, was a fraud installed by the federal government to maintain a lie about the town's origin. The Northwest family fortune is built on a lie. The Northwest Mansion is built on a lie. The whole town's official history is built on a lie, and the only people who know are the sheriff, the deputy, and a federal agent who briefly tries to ship a peanut brittle president to Washington in a wooden crate. This is the Northwest cover-up. It is the deepest political conspiracy in the show, and it is also the part of the show that the fandom takes the least seriously, because the episode plays it so broadly that the implications get buried under the jokes. But there are pieces that the fandom keeps coming back to. Thomas Jefferson was actually just two kids in an overcoat standing on each other's shoulders. The current and forever president of the United States is actually Santa Claus. Under the reign of Mr. Claus, America is not a democracy, but a jollyocracy. The statues at Mount Rushmore are actually gigantic presidential-faced robots that will be called into action when America needs them the most. An enormous, evil, time-devouring baby from another dimension is frozen in an Antarctic glacier. Fortunately, glaciers never melt, so we should be fine. The Northwest cover-up document, which the kids read in Irrational Treasure, contains a list of additional government secrets. Most of them are jokes, some of them are not. One of them references an enormous, evil, time-devouring baby from another dimension frozen in an Antarctic glacier. This is the first mention in the show of Time Baby, the cosmic tyrant who rules future Earth from the year 3012 onward. The joke about the glacier turns out to be canon. The line that sounded like nonsense was actually a piece of deep lore the show paid off later, which makes you go back and reread the rest of the list. Thomas Jefferson was two kids in a coat. Probably a joke. Probably. Santa Claus runs America. Almost certainly a joke. Almost. The statues at Mount Rushmore are giant robots waiting to be activated when America needs them. The fandom has been chewing on this one for a decade because nothing in Gravity Falls is ever fully a joke. The show plants seeds. The seeds sit. Some of them sprout. Some of them never do. The Mount Rushmore robots have never sprouted, but the Time Baby line did. So which of the others might? The president's key inside the slab of peanut brittle. When Tremblay is finally cracked open by Mabel, the kids find that he is carrying something. A small key, solid gold, strange shape. The president's key is one of the most underrated artifacts in the show. Eventually, the short-lived 8th-and-a-half president of the United States, Quentin Tremblay, was given the key, which he swallowed to preserve its power. However, his presidential term was viewed as an embarrassment due to his rampant silliness, and he was thus kicked out of office, with all knowledge of his term covered up. He was able to escape to a small valley in Oregon, where he would found the town of Gravity Falls. The key was lost with him. The key is described as having the power to unlock anything, any door, any lock, any prison, any cage. The key was passed down from president to president for generations as a kind of secret American artifact, a tool the executive branch held in reserve for whatever cosmic emergency might require something to be opened in a hurry. Tremblay swallowed it, hid it inside his own peanut brittle body, and carried it into the wilderness when he was exiled. The key sat in his stomach for 150 years. Dipper recovers it. Dipper uses it to free Stan from the stockades, and then the key disappears from the plot. This is the basis of one of the most prominent plot holes in Gravity Falls, which is that the president's key could have been used to open the lock of Mabel World. In Weirdmageddon Part 2, Escape from Reality, the fandom calls this one of the biggest unresolved holes in the show. The key can open anything. The key is in Dipper's pocket for the rest of the series, presumably. And during Weirdmageddon, when the kids are trying to enter Mabel World, an entire dimension Mabel has built for herself inside a bubble of fantasy, they spend a lot of effort breaking through the bubble's outer membrane. They never reach for the key. The key is never mentioned again. It is structurally a Chekhov's gun that the show never fires. Why? Either the key was forgotten by the writers, which is the boring answer, or the key has limits. The show never spells out, which is the interesting answer. Maybe the key can open physical locks, but not dimensional barriers. Maybe the key has been broken by something we did not see. Maybe Dipper lost it. The show never says. The president's key, the artifact that survived 150 years inside a man's stomach, sits in some pocket somewhere, unused, while the universe falls apart. The other unanswered question, the one fans like to play with, is what the key was originally for. Tremblay swallowed it to preserve its power. Power against what? What was the federal government keeping a magic skeleton key in reserve to unlock? Whose prison? Whose vault? Whose cell? The line about Time Baby being frozen in an Antarctic glacier comes from the same document that mentions the key on the same page. The fandom has long played with the idea that the president's key is the key to Time Baby's glacier. That if the glaciers ever melted, or if somebody ever needed to release Time Baby ahead of schedule, the president's key was the tool the United States government had been saving for that purpose. This is speculation. None of it is confirmed. But it is the kind of speculation the show invites, because the show plants the pieces in plain sight and then walks away whistling. The cipher wheel, there is a circle in the opening credits of every episode. It appears for maybe 2 seconds just before the title card. The circle has 10 symbols arranged around its perimeter, and in the very center of the circle is a yellow triangle. The cipher wheel is one of the most important visual elements in the entire series, and for 2 seasons, nobody on the show ever mentions it. It just sits in the title sequence. Fans noticed it. Fans drew it. Fans analyzed it. Fans connected each symbol to a character on the show. The pine tree was Dipper. The shooting star was Mabel. The question mark was Suze. The ice bag was Wendy. The fez was Stan. The six-fingered hand was Ford. The llama was Pacifica. The stitched heart was Robbie. The glasses were McGucket. The crescent moon was Gideon Gleeful. In the Season 2 finale, Ford reveals what the wheel actually is. The cipher wheel seen in the opening credits led fans to believe that 10 specific characters would have to join hands to defeat Bill. The theory correctly identified the symbols: the pine tree, Dipper; shooting star, Mabel; question mark, Suze; ice bag, Wendy; fez symbol, Stan; six-fingered hand, Ford; llama, Pacifica; stitched heart, Robbie; glasses, Fiddleford McGucket. The wheel is a prophecy. The wheel is an ancient ritual circle, predating the Pines family by thousands of years, that contains the names of the 10 beings who are destined to defeat Bill Cipher. The fandom called this exactly right, 2 seasons in advance, just by looking at the title sequence. But there is something the fandom did not call right, and it is one of the strangest pieces of the show. The wheel does not work. In the climax of Weirdmageddon 2, Escape from Reality, Ford gathers the 10 people the wheel pointed to. They stand in a circle. They hold hands. They are about to complete the ritual. And then Stan and Ford get into a fight. The circle is broken, and Bill captures them. The prophecy fails. The ritual does not save the world. The wheel turns out to be a red herring, or at least a thing that could have worked if humans had not gotten in the way of themselves. The eventual defeat of Bill happens by a completely different mechanism, which we will get to in the last chunk. But the cipher wheel, the giant prophetic ritual circle that fans spent 2 whole seasons decoding, ends up doing nothing. The fandom has wrestled with this for years. Some fans see it as Hirsch's commentary on prophecy in general. Prophecies are not laws. Prophecies are possibilities. The wheel was a path the universe wanted the Pines family to take. The Pines family, being the Pines family, broke the path. They saved the world anyway, in their own messy way, but they did it by improvisation, not by ritual. The wheel was a tool the cosmos handed them. They lost the tool. They had to use their hands. Other fans take a different reading. The wheel did not fail. The wheel succeeded. The 10 symbols are still on the wheel. The 10 people are still alive at the end of the show. The wheel is in some sense still spinning. And if Bill ever returns, the way the Axolotl's poem promises he can, then the wheel will spin again. In a different time, in a different form, with possibly different people in the same 10 positions. The wheel is generational. The wheel is patient. The wheel does not care about a single failure in 2012. The wheel is waiting. There's also the question of who built the wheel in the first place. Ford says he found the wheel in a cave, that the symbols were carved into the walls of a chamber, so old that the rock around it had buried it from the rest of the world. During the roadblock, he uncovered the ancient cave containing the ancient stories of Bill Cipher. Heedless of the warnings, Ford repeated the incantation aloud, summoning Bill into his mindscape. Some early civilization in the Gravity Falls region knew about Bill, knew about the cipher wheel, knew about the prophecy of the 10 symbols. Who were they? The show calls them the Ancients and leaves it at that. The Ancients are one of the deepest unsolved threads in the show. The Ancients knew about Bill before any of the modern characters did. The Ancients knew the prophecy. The Ancients carved the wheel into a cave wall in a language Ford had to translate, and the Ancients somehow knew the specific symbols that would correspond to people who would not be born for thousands of years. A fez, an ice bag, a shooting star sweater. These are modern objects. These are objects that did not exist when the cave was carved, and yet the symbols on the wall match the modern characters perfectly. How? Either the Ancients were prophets in the literal sense, somehow shown a vision of a future they could not have imagined, or the modern characters were guided into their symbols by something that wanted the wheel to come true. Mabel wears the shooting star sweater because Mabel chose to wear it. Stan wears the fez because Philbrick gave it to Ford and Stan inherited it. Wendy holds the ice bag in one episode and the symbol stuck. Each of these is, on the surface, a coincidence. The wheel makes it not a coincidence. The wheel makes it destiny. This is the kind of detail that gives the show its weight. The everyday objects of the modern characters are matched eerily to symbols carved into a cave wall thousands of years ago. Either the universe of Gravity Falls is full of prophecy in the deepest possible sense, or some intelligence has been engineering the lives of the Pines family for a very long time. The axolotl? Possibly. Bill? Possibly. Even though Bill is the one the wheel is designed to stop. Some third party we have not met. Possibly. The show never says. The mailbox. There is a mailbox in the woods. The mailbox is in Mailbox. The episode is short. The episode is one of 3 mini-episodes packaged together in Bottomless Pit, and the episode is generally treated by fans as a low-key throwaway story. The mailbox is sitting in the forest. The kids find it. The kids put questions in it. The mailbox answers the questions in writing. The mailbox can predict the future. This is one of the most casually horrifying objects in the entire show. An object capable of accurately predicting future events would, in any other show, be the central artifact of the entire plot. In Gravity Falls, the mailbox is a 15-minute side story in a clip show episode. The mailbox answers correctly. The mailbox answers something that the show later confirms is true. The mailbox stays in the woods. The mailbox is never used by anyone again. The most famous question the kids put into the mailbox is the question of when the world will end. The mailbox answers in a date code that decodes to 3012, which is exactly when Time Baby is said to begin his despotic reign over future Earth. The mailbox is not making things up. The mailbox is plugged into something. The mailbox is in some way a small terminal for an oracle that lives somewhere in the woods or in the dimensions next door. Who built the mailbox? What is it connected to? Why is it in the forest, unguarded, available to any 12-year-old who happens to walk by? This is the deep, persistent strangeness of Gravity Falls. The town is full of artifacts whose existence implies vast hidden infrastructure. A mailbox that talks to a cosmic oracle. A key that opens any lock. A cipher wheel carved into a cave wall by people who saw a future they should not have been able to see. A goat with rectangular pupils who is, according to a book Bill wrote, the only animal Bill can possess without changing the shape of its eyes. The town is layered, layer upon layer upon layer. The show, in its 38 episodes, only scratches a few of them. The cliffs hum. The mailbox waits in the dark. The peanut brittle president is somewhere out there in retirement, presumably telling stories nobody believes. The cipher wheel is still in the opening credits of every episode, even now, 10 years after the show ended, and somewhere in the mystery shack in a drawer Seuss has never opened. The president's key is sitting in the dust, gold and cold, waiting for somebody to need it again. Stan's missing decade, between the moment Stan got thrown out of the family pawn shop at 16 and the moment Stan walked into Gravity Falls in his 30s, there is a gap. The gap is a decade long. The gap is full of names. The gap is full of crimes. And the gap is one of the show's most quietly intriguing pieces of biography because we have just enough information about it to know we are missing most of it. Stan's official biography, as compiled from his Wikipedia entry and from the wiki, lists the following aliases he used during those years. Stanley Pines, alias Stanford Pines. Steve Pennington, Stetson Pinefield, Andrew 8-Ball Alcatraz, Hal Forrester. 5 aliases at least. Probably more. Each alias represents a stretch of his life he lived under a different identity, in a different town, doing different things. Stan moved across the country running scams. Stan got banned from multiple states. Stan picked up multiple ex-wives, including one woman named Marilyn, whom he was married to for 6 hours before getting a divorce. The wiki notes this as a casual factoid. Stan was married for 6 hours to a woman whose last name is, according to the official records of the show, Fakename, with an accent on the E. The whole entry is a joke. The whole entry is also almost certainly hiding something. What did Stan do in those 10 years? We get fragments. A flashback in A Tale of Two Stans shows Stan working a string of grift jobs across the Southwest, selling fake products, getting chased out of towns, sleeping in his car. Another flashback shows him in Colombia, briefly doing something with a duffel bag and a parrot. Another shows him in a strange snowy place that fans have argued for years is somewhere in Eastern Europe or possibly the Yukon. The show implies, without ever quite saying, that Stan crossed multiple international borders during this decade. Sometimes legally, often not. The aliases are the part that fans keep returning to. Andrew 8-Ball Alcatraz is an alias that strongly suggests Stan did time in prison, and the 8-Ball nickname likely comes from his cane, the one with the billiard 8-ball on top that he carries through the entire show. If Stan was in prison, when was he in prison? And for what? The show never tells us. Hal Forrester suggests a lumber region identity, which fans have connected to a possible stretch in the Pacific Northwest before Ford's invitation. Stetson Pinefield suggests a Texas or Western identity, which connects to certain flashback scenes set in dry, dusty country. The fandom has built a kind of unofficial map of Stan's lost decade out of these pieces. The map is incomplete. The map is mostly guesswork, but the map exists. And the question of what Stan was actually like during those years, what kind of man he became before Ford pulled him back into the family, is one that the show treats as comedy and that the fandom treats as character study. There is a darker reading too. Stan, by the time he reaches Gravity Falls, is a man capable of impersonating his own twin brother for 30 years without breaking. That is not a small skill. That is the skill of a person who has lived under so many false identities that picking up a new one is reflex. Stan does not slip up. Stan does not crack. Stan walks into Ford's life, takes Ford's name, takes Ford's house, and lives there as a different person for 3 decades without ever being caught. He fooled the bank. He fooled the town. He fooled Suze. He fooled Wendy. He fooled, eventually, his own great-niece and great-nephew, who came to Gravity Falls believing they were spending the summer with their great-uncle Stanford, and were actually spending it with their great-uncle Stanley. The skill required to pull that off comes from somewhere. The skill came from those 10 years on the road. The skill came from being Steve Pennington and Stetson Pinefield and Hal Forrester. Each of those identities was practice. Each of those identities was a rehearsal for the long con that would become his life in Gravity Falls. Stan did not become Mr. Mystery by accident. Stan became Mr. Mystery because Mr. Mystery was just the latest in a long line of made-up men he had been wearing since he was a teenager. The most haunting question is the question of whether Stanley Pines, the original boy from Glass Shard Beach, the one who broke the science fair project in the basement and got thrown out of his house, is even in there anymore. 30 years of being Stanford, 10 years before that of being Steve and Stetson and Hal and Andrew. By the time Stan finally takes off the disguises and goes back to being Stanley, the boy who originally answered to that name has been buried under so many other names that even Stan might not remember which version of himself is real. The show ends with Stan sailing the Stan-O War II into the Arctic with his brother. Stan and Ford, finally, both using their real names again after a combined 60-plus years of being other people. The boat sails away, the credits roll, and somewhere in the Pines family, a part of Stan that has been impersonated, repressed, and overwritten so many times that nobody can find the original anymore is, presumably, just glad to be quiet for once. The shapeshifter in the bunker. There is a creature in Gravity Falls who can become anything. The creature is called the Shapeshifter, and the creature appears in Into the Bunker in Season 2. Ford captured the creature decades ago, sealed it in a cryogenic chamber in the bottom of a buried bunker in the forest, and forgot about it. The kids accidentally release it. The creature, before it is frozen again by Dipper, takes on the shape of Dipper himself, then takes on the shape of a horror nobody recognizes, and whispers to Dipper a vision of how Dipper will eventually die. The shapeshifter is one of the most disturbing creatures in the show. Not because of what it does, which is mostly threaten the kids, but because of what it knows. The shapeshifter shows Dipper an image of his own future death, and the image is so unsettling that the show does not show it to the audience. We only see Dipper's face as Dipper looks at it. We do not see what Dipper sees, and the question of what the shapeshifter showed him, and whether the vision was prophecy or just intimidation, is one the show never resolves, but the bigger mystery is the origin of the shapeshifter itself. The shapeshifter was the specimen aboard the UFO, and it escaped and killed the entire crew, causing the ship to crash on Earth. The shapeshifter is an alien of some sort. The leading fan theory, supported by visual clues in Dipper and Mabel versus the future, is that the shapeshifter, or its parent, was the cargo on the alien ship that crashed into Gravity Falls 30 million years ago. The shapeshifter was the specimen the pan-dimensional beings were transporting. The shapeshifter broke loose during the flight. The shapeshifter killed the crew. The ship lost control. The ship crashed. The crater became the valley. The valley became Gravity Falls. If this reading is correct, then the entire town exists because of the shapeshifter. The shapeshifter is the original sin of the valley. The shapeshifter is the reason the cliffs float, and the reason the weirdness leaks through the ground, and the reason Bill Cipher was drawn to this specific patch of Oregon out of all the places on Earth. The shapeshifter is, in a strange way, the godparent of the entire show, and the shapeshifter has been alive the whole time, 30 million years. Frozen, mostly, but alive. The thing in the cryogenic chamber in Ford's bunker is the oldest living thing on Earth. The shapeshifter has been on this planet longer than mammals. The shapeshifter has watched continents drift. The shapeshifter has watched ice ages come and go. And the shapeshifter, by the end of the show, is frozen again in the bottom of a buried bunker, in a forest, in Oregon, with the door sealed and the entrance hidden, and the only people who know where it is being Dipper, Mabel, Ford, Stan, Wendy, and Suze. What if the door opens again? What if somebody in the years after the show finds the bunker? What if the cryogenic seal fails? What if the shapeshifter, after 30 million years of waiting, finally gets out for good? This is one of the threads the show plants and walks away from. The shapeshifter is still in the bunker. The bunker is still in the forest. The forest is still in Gravity Falls. And the same questions that applied at the start of the show about who is keeping the town invisible, about what is still leaking from the cracks, apply to the shapeshifter too. Somebody is going to find that bunker eventually. Somebody is going to open the chamber. And when they do, a creature older than primates is going to wake up hungry. The gnomes are organized of all the creatures in Gravity Falls. The ones that get the least respect are the gnomes. The gnomes show up in the first episode, Tourist Trapped, as the inciting threat. A boy named Norman tries to date Mabel, and Norman turns out to be a tower of gnomes stacked on top of each other inside a trench coat. The gnomes want to make Mabel their queen. The kids defeat the gnomes with a leaf blower. The episode ends. The gnomes become background creatures for the rest of the show, appearing occasionally for visual gags. But the gnomes are not a joke. The gnomes are one of the most structurally interesting creatures in the show, and almost nobody talks about them. The gnomes have a society. The gnomes have a king, a man named Jeff, who functions as their political leader. The gnomes have a written language. The gnomes have a tradition of taking wives, which is presented in the show as comedic, but is, on closer inspection, deeply unsettling. The gnomes have been operating in the Gravity Falls forest for an unknown length of time, possibly centuries, possibly longer. The gnomes vomit rainbows. The gnomes vomit rainbows when frightened, sick, or emotional, and the rainbows are made of some kind of organic crystalline substance that the show never explains. Where do the rainbows come from? Why do they take the form of rainbows? The show never says. The gnomes are creatures whose biology, if you stop and think about it, makes no sense at all. They are short, they have beards, they have human-like faces, they can stack to imitate adult human shapes, and they vomit physical, multicolored, gemstone-like spectra. What are the gnomes? The show suggests they are some kind of indigenous magical creature, like the Gobblewonker or the Multibear. But the gnomes have a king, the gnomes have laws, the gnomes have rituals. The gnomes are organized in a way that the other forest creatures are not. The gnomes have, in some readings, the makings of a civilization that exists parallel to and underneath human civilization in the Pacific Northwest. They are the people who lived in those woods before the humans showed up. They are still there. They are still organizing, and occasionally, when a human girl walks into their forest, they try to make her their queen. This is, when you frame it that way, a colonization story playing in reverse. The humans came to the valley. The gnomes were already there. The gnomes have not given up. The gnomes are still trying to take humans for themselves. The show plays it as comedy because the gnomes are tiny and silly, but the gnomes are also patient. The gnomes are still in the woods at the end of the show. The gnomes are still organizing. The most unsettling thing the gnomes do in their second appearance in The Inconveniencing is sit in a tree in the dark, watching the Pines family from a distance. Just watching, not attacking, not approaching, just watching. The gnomes do not forget. The gnomes saw Mabel reject Jeff. The gnomes have grudges, and the gnomes are not going anywhere. Gideon's real power. There is a child in Gravity Falls with white hair, a blue suit, and a voice like a tent revival preacher, and the child can read minds. Lil Gideon Gleeful runs a stage show called Gideon's Tent of Telepathy. The show is the main competition to Stan's Mystery Shack. Gideon does psychic readings on stage. Gideon tells members of his audience things about themselves that no one else knows. Gideon makes a lot of money. Gideon dresses in tiny suits. Gideon has a crush on Mabel that he expresses in ways that range from creepy to outright dangerous. For most of Season 1, the show implies Gideon is a fake. Gideon is a child grifter, the way Stan is an adult grifter. Gideon's psychic act is a scam. The way the Mystery Shack's exhibits are a scam. Gideon does his readings using a glowing amulet around his neck, which the show treats as the source of his apparent powers. The amulet does telekinesis. The amulet does psychic projection. The amulet is the trick. The amulet gets destroyed at the end of the hand that rocks the Mabel. Mabel breaks it. The amulet shatters. Gideon falls. The threat seems to be neutralized, except Gideon keeps doing readings. This is the part fans noticed, and the show never resolves. Gideon, after losing the amulet, continues to do his stage show. Gideon continues to know things about his audience members that he should not know. Gideon's readings continue to be accurate. The show plays this off as Gideon being a clever observer of body language, the way real-world fake psychics often are. Gideon is reading micro-expressions. Gideon is using cold reading techniques. Gideon is a con man, like Stan, who happens to be a child, but there is a quieter reading, one the fandom has played with, that says Gideon was always partially psychic. The amulet amplified what Gideon already had. The amulet gave him telekinesis and projection, but the mind reading was Gideon's own talent, native to him, present before the amulet ever came into his hands. Gideon's father is a working-class man with no apparent supernatural abilities. Gideon's mother is similarly normal. Where did the talent come from? Some fans have argued Gideon's existence is itself a piece of evidence that some level of low-grade supernatural ability runs through the Gravity Falls population, the way the cliffs warp gravity and the goat watches everything. The town leaks weirdness into its children. Gideon is one of those leaks. Gideon is, in some sense, what happens when a normal kid grows up inside the dimensional bruise of Gravity Falls. There is also the question of Gideon's father, Bud Gleeful, and Gideon's father's used car salesman energy. Bud is, on the surface, a cheerful schlub. Bud is, on closer inspection, a deeply enabling parent who has watched his son commit increasingly serious crimes and done nothing to stop him. Bud is, by the end of the show, in jail with Gideon. The two of them are ultimately the rare Gravity Falls subplot that ends with the villains incarcerated and the consequences sticking. Most villains in the show get redemption arcs. Gideon gets one too, sort of, late in the series. But the Gleeful family is the closest thing the show has to a portrait of multi-generational moral rot. And the question of whether Gideon's psychic ability is innate, environmental, or amulet borrowed is, in many readings, less interesting than the question of how a 10-year-old child became capable of summoning Bill Cipher in the first place. Because that is the thing about Gideon. Gideon summoned Bill, Gideon did the ritual, Gideon, a child, knew the right candles to light and the right words to speak in the right backwards voice. To invoke a trillion-year-old chaos god into a small room in a small town in Oregon. Where did Gideon learn that ritual? The show says Gideon found the second of the 3 journals. The one Stan used to be able to open the portal. The journal had the ritual in it. Gideon read the ritual. Gideon performed the ritual. Gideon got the demon to show up. But Gideon is 10. 10-year-olds do not casually summon dream demons. 10-year-olds do not casually develop relationships with eldritch entities. Gideon does both. Gideon has, by the time of Dreamscaperers, a working professional relationship with Bill Cipher, in which Bill takes Gideon's requests and acts on them in exchange for unspecified future favors. The favors are never collected on screen. The favors are, presumably, still owed, and Gideon, by the end of the show, is still owed favors by Bill, in some technical sense. Even though Bill is currently in a tank outside of space being watched over by a salamander god. What happens to those favors? What happens to the debts Bill left behind when he was erased? Are they still in the cosmic record? Is somebody else collecting on them? The show never says. The cliffs hum. The bunker is sealed. The gnomes are watching from the trees. The shapeshifter is sleeping under the ice. The president's key is in a drawer. The cipher wheel is on the cave wall, and somewhere in a tiny cell in a tiny prison, a 10-year-old in a blue suit is, presumably, still reading the minds of the guards. The day the Sky Tour opened there is a day in Gravity Falls when reality stops working. The day is the day Weirdmageddon begins. The day is the day a small rift in the dimensions, sitting in a glass case in Ford's lab, gets dropped, breaks open, and tears the sky over the town in half. The day is the day Bill Cipher finally crosses over from the nightmare realm into the 3rd dimension and starts pouring his nightmare across the valley like ink into water. The episode is called Weirdmageddon Part 1, Take Back the Falls, and the episode is the moment the show stops being a show about a summer adventure and becomes a show about the end of the world. The sky turns red, the clouds turn to fire, eye-bats float through the streets. Bill's friends, a gallery of nightmare creatures from across the multiverse, pour through the rift and start eating buildings. The townspeople get turned into stone. The Mystery Shack becomes the only safe place in the valley, protected by a unicorn hair barrier that Bill cannot cross. The fandom calls this the moment the show showed its real face. The seasons before Weirdmageddon were dark in patches, but mostly playful. Weirdmageddon is not playful. Weirdmageddon is a slow-motion apocalypse drawn in the same cartoon style as the show's earlier comedy. The contrast is what makes it work. The same character designs that were running around in roller skate rinks in Season 1 are now hiding from interdimensional cops in a fortified bunker. The town the audience grew to love over 30-some episodes is, by the second part of the finale, completely gone. The valley is wreckage. The cliffs still float, because the cliffs have always been a wound. But everything between the cliffs is rubble. And the most disturbing piece of Weirdmageddon, the piece the fandom keeps coming back to, is that the rest of the world does not know it is happening. Bill, when he comes through the rift, sets up a dimensional barrier around the town. The barrier prevents him and his nightmares from spreading beyond the valley walls. The barrier also prevents news of what is happening inside from reaching the outside world. From a satellite view, Gravity Falls looks normal. From the perspective of any nearby town, Gravity Falls looks normal. The news reports refer to a strange weather phenomenon. The federal government briefly sends an investigation team, which gets vaporized at the border. After that, the federal government quietly puts up its own barrier of denial and waits for the situation to resolve itself. This is, in some readings, the most chilling piece of world building in the show. The worst supernatural event in modern human history is happening inside a single Oregon Valley. The rest of the world does not know. The rest of the world has been told it is bad weather. The rest of the world goes to work, watches TV, eats dinner, and inside the barrier, the people of Gravity Falls are fighting a war against a triangle. From a flat universe, a trillion years older than time itself. The Society of the Blind Eye was supposed to keep things quiet. The Society of the Blind Eye is gone, dismantled by the kids in the middle of Season 2. But the function the Society served of keeping Gravity Falls invisible to the wider world is, in some way, still operating. Some force somewhere is making sure the apocalypse stays local. Bill's barrier accounts for part of it. The federal cover-up accounts for part, but the totality of the silence, the way the rest of the country shrugs and moves on, has a coordinated feel to it that the show never properly explains. Somebody is helping. Somebody outside the valley wants the rest of the country to not know what is happening in Gravity Falls. Who? Why? The show ends before this question gets asked, much less answered. And the Book of Bill, written from the perspective of a triangle locked in a salamander's tank, has no incentive to address it. The true defeat Bill does not die in a battle. Bill does not die in a ritual. Bill does not die because the cipher wheel was completed, because the cipher wheel was never completed. Bill dies inside someone's mind. This is the part the show plays so quickly that most first-time viewers miss the mechanics. In the climax of Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, the Pines family, having failed the cipher wheel ritual, falls back on a different plan. The plan is built on a trick. Stan and Ford agree to switch clothes. Stan, dressed as Ford, will let Bill enter his mind, believing he is entering Ford's mind. Once Bill is inside, Ford will use the memory gun, the same memory erasing device the Society of the Blind Eye used for decades, and erase Stan's mind. Bill, trapped inside the mind being erased, will be erased along with it. The plan works. Bill steps into Stan's head, thinking he is in Ford's head, and starts laughing about how he has finally won. Ford pulls the trigger. The memory gun fires. Stan's entire personality, every memory of his life, every alias, every wife, every con, every brother, every twin, every summer at the pawn shop gets wiped out. And in the moment of erasure, Bill, who is mentally tethered to Stan, gets erased with it. Bill's last act is to scream the backwards prayer to the axolotl, the prayer that fans translated and that the wiki later confirmed. AXOLOTL. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. The prayer is heard. The salamander god, watching from the tank outside of space, receives it. Bill is not destroyed. Bill is transferred. Bill is sent to a holding cell to wait for the conditions of the poem to be met. And in the basement of the Mystery Shack, an old man named Stan Pines sits in a chair, with his memory gone, blinking at the people around him, having no idea who any of them are. The way the show resolves this is one of the most emotionally weighted scenes in any animated series of the last 20 years. Mabel, the optimist, the heart of the family, sits with her grunkle Stan and slowly walks him through his own life. She uses the family photo album. She uses the scrapbook she has been making all summer. She uses her own voice. She names each person in each picture. She names herself. She names Dipper. She names Suze and Wendy. She names Ford. And gradually, over the course of long, quiet minutes, Stan's memories come back. Not all of them, not perfectly, but enough. The trick the show pulls here is that Stan's defeat of Bill, the most cosmically significant act in the history of the show, is also the most domestic. Bill is destroyed not by a magic circle, not by a chosen one, not by a sword forged from starlight. Bill is destroyed because two old brothers swapped clothes and a little girl had a good scrapbook. The cosmos hands the universe-saving moment over to a family that has spent the whole show pretending not to love each other, and that, in the final hour, finally admits that they do. Stan recovers. Stan is himself again. Mostly Stan and Ford set out together. In the Stan-O War 2 at the end of the summer, finally on the global voyage. They dreamed about as children in the basement of a New Jersey pawn shop, finally doing the thing they were supposed to do together, before a science fair project broke, and a father chose one son over the other, and 46 years of grief followed. The kids go home. Dipper and Mabel turn 13 at the end of the summer. They board a bus back to California. The town stays standing. The cliffs still float. The things the show never closed. Here's the part that keeps the fandom up at night. The show ended in 2016. The show is, in terms of original episodes, finished. There are 40 episodes including specials, and they have all aired, and they are all on streaming services. And that is the whole thing. The Book of Bill, released in 2024, added 8 more years of lore, but it did not add an episode 41. There is no episode 41. There never will be. And yet, when you count the unsolved pieces, the list is long. The monocle on the journal is still unexplained. The floating cliffs are the rim of a crater. Yes, but the question of whether the crater is the source of the weirdness or just a wound, on top of an older weirdness, is still open. The parents of Dipper and Mabel are still unseen. Wendy's mother is still unmentioned. Shermie pines. The bridge between the twin generations is still a footnote. The question of whether Stan actually broke the science fair project, or whether something else did, is still debated in fan forums. The president's key is still in a drawer. The cipher wheel is still in the cave. The ancients are still unnamed. The shapeshifter is still in the bunker. The gnomes are still in the trees. Gideon's psychic ability is still ambiguous. The mailbox is still in the woods, presumably still answering questions, presumably still telling the future. Bill's true name has never been said. Bill's return, promised by the axolotl poem, has never happened on screen. The fandom has, in some ways, built a parallel show in the spaces between these threads. The fanfiction archives are immense. The theory blogs are immense. The Tumblr communities, the Reddit communities, the YouTube channels are immense. People have been writing about Gravity Falls for over a decade now, and the show has been the same 40 episodes the whole time. The lore has grown anyway, because the show is the kind of show that grows in the audience's head, whether new material is added or not. Because every viewer is also, in a small way, a researcher. Because the journal Dipper finds in the first episode is, structurally, an invitation to the audience to keep digging. The clues do not stop, the clues just stop being canon. What Gravity Falls actually was. There's one more layer to the show that the fandom has been peeling at for years, and it is the layer that the show itself almost addresses but never quite says out loud. Gravity Falls, the place may not be a place. Gravity Falls is a town that by the end of the show has hosted a buried alien spacecraft, 30 million years old, a creature that can take any shape and predict the future, a dream demon from a destroyed two-dimensional universe, a forgotten president preserved in peanut brittle, a tribe of organized rainbow-vomiting gnomes, a mailbox that talks to a cosmic oracle, a goat that can be possessed without changing the shape of its eyes, a portal between dimensions. In the basement of a tourist trap, a cosmic time tyrant frozen in an Antarctic glacier. Referenced as canon by a federal document, a salamander god who watches over the multiverse, and a single family of twins whose generational pattern is hooked into the prophecy that decides the fate of the universe. This is a lot of weirdness for one valley. The show explains it through proximity to the nightmare realm. The show explains it through the buried alien ship. The show explains it through the cipher prophecy. But none of those explanations, individually, accounts for all of it. The simpler explanation, the one the fandom returns to over and over, is that Gravity Falls is not a place but a phenomenon. Gravity Falls is a thin spot in the universe. Gravity Falls is the wound the multiverse made when it scratched itself, and the wound never fully healed. And now everything weird in reality gravitates to the wound. The way iron filings gravitate to a magnet. If that reading is correct, then the town is, in some sense, alive. The town is not a passive setting. The town is the protagonist. The Pines family did not come to Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls drew them in. The kids did not stumble onto the journals. The journals were waiting. The cipher wheel did not need to be activated because the cipher wheel already knew the names of the 10 people whose lives the town had been quietly shaping for decades. Everyone in the town who lives a strange life, every manly Dan who punches trees, and every lazy Susan who has one wandering eye, and every old man McGucket who lives in the dump, and every Sheriff Blubbs who weeps openly at romantic movies is the way they are partially because of where they live. The town shaped them. The town shapes everyone in it. The town, in the deepest reading of the show, is just another character in its own story. This is the kind of reading that lets you sleep on the show. The town did what it needed to do. The kids did what they were summoned to do. Bill came as far as the town would let him come. The town protected itself by routing the entire trillion-year-old conflict through one family and one summer, and one set of grandparents by blood and marriage who happened to have the right combination of grief and stubbornness to push the conflict to a close. The town will do it again, if it has to, with different people, in a different summer, in a different decade, because the town is not done. The town has too many unsolved pieces still inside it for the town to be done. The monocle is still on the journal. The mailbox is still in the woods. The shapeshifter is still in the bunker. The gnomes are still organizing. Pacifica Northwest is still alive and still on the cipher wheel, and still tied to a family curse that ran 150 years deep, and that one party in one mansion was not enough to fully heal. The president's key is in a drawer. The cliffs hum, and somewhere outside of space, in a tank of liquid that does not exist in our laws of physics, a giant salamander is watching a triangle wait the final quiet. The boat sails north. The Stan-O War II disappears into the Arctic horizon. The brothers finally are together. 46 years of resentment and impersonation and grief are folded up like a flag and put in a drawer in the bottom of the boat. Stan is using his own name again. Ford is using his own name again. They have, somehow, both at the same time, become the men they were going to be before everything went wrong. The kids are on a bus south. Dipper has his journal, what is left of it. Mabel has her scrapbook. Suze has the mystery shack. Wendy has her family, and her town, and her future. Gideon is in a tiny cell with his father. McGucket is rich, somehow, having sold a piece of alien tech to the government for an undisclosed sum, and McGucket is living in the old Northwest Manor, opening the gates to the townspeople, the way Pacifica did during the ghost party, finally giving the manor back to the people the Northwests took it from. And in the woods, the mailbox sits in the dirt, and in the lake, something that might or might not be a gobblewonker rolls in the deep water. And in the trees, a tower of gnomes, stacked inside a trench coat, is presumably still trying to find another girl to make their queen. And under the ice, in a sealed chamber, in a bunker that may or may not still be a secret, the shapeshifter waits. The town goes to sleep. The cliffs hum. The journal lies on a shelf somewhere, and the monocle on its spine swings gently in the dark. The unsolved mysteries of Gravity Falls are not, in the end, mysteries that anyone is going to solve. The unsolved mysteries of Gravity Falls are the spaces the show left around itself, so the audience could keep living inside it. The mysteries are doors that were left open on purpose. The mysteries are an invitation. The town is still there. The town will always be there. And whether you're watching the show for the first time or the 10th, the same thing is true. Trust no one. Watch the floating cliffs. Listen for the mailbox. And remember the salamander. Good night.